Coming up on Arirang News. North Korea has launched several cruise missiles again off its west coast, this time for the third time in less than a week. It's believed to be aiming at enhancing the performance of its newly developed weapon system. President Yoon vows to digitize around 1,500 public services in the next 3 years. Organizational hassles will be removed from the online gaming and telemedicine services as well. The United States issues a stern warning that it'll respond to the attack that killed 3 American troops in northeast Jordan over the weekend. The U.S. blames Iran-backed militias, but reiterates it is not looking for a war. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with yet another round of cruise missile launches by North Korea for the third time in less than a week. This morning, the regime fired them into the sea off its west coast, apparently seeking to advance its newly developed weapon system. Our defense correspondent Min has our top story.
North Korea has fired another round of cruise missiles, this time off its western coast. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff detected the launch of several cruise missiles at around 7 a.m. Tuesday into the West Sea.
Our military has been closely coordinating with the U.S. to monitor additional signs of North Korea's provocations while strengthening our monitoring and vigilance.
This is the third cruise missile launch in less than a week. On the 24th, North Korea test-fired a newly developed strategic cruise missile named the Bulhwasal 3-31 for the very first time from a ground launcher toward the West Sea. And on the 28th, the same cruise missiles were launched from a submarine off its eastern coast. The type of cruise missile used for Tuesday's launch is unknown, but they're anticipated to have flown 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers. South Korean military officials and experts believe the test is aimed at enhancing the performance of the newly developed weapon system.
Firing cruise missiles toward the West Sea and the East Sea from land and sea is proof that improving the performance is important. North Korea is probably conducting final performance tests ahead of the actual deployment of this cruise missile.
Professor Yang Mu-jin at the University of North Korean Studies added that cruise missiles are cutting-edge weapons in terms of their accuracy and maneuverability and could potentially neutralize Seoul and Washington's defense strategy, adding that the government should continue to strengthen deterrence centered on the Seoul-Washington alliance, but should also refrain from neglecting dialogue. Min, Arirang News.
Moving on to Sunday's deadly drone attack in northeast Jordan. Washington has reiterated its commitment to react to hold anyone accountable. But it also says it does not want an escalation of war in the Middle East. Song Yu-jin reports.
For the second straight day, the United States has said that it does intend to respond to Sunday's drone attack that resulted in the deaths of 3 U.S. soldiers and injured more than 40 at its Tower 22 military base in Jordan. Washington has been blaming Iran-backed militant groups in Iraq and Syria. On Monday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken issued another stern warning.
So the attacks that have taken place since October on our forces, on our personnel, in both Iraq and Syria, have been conducted by groups that are aligned with Iran and indeed are supported by Iran, funded by Iran, equipped by Iran. We will respond decisively to any aggression, and we will hold responsible the people who attacked our troops.
Iran, on the other hand, is denying any involvement.
Repeating baseless accusations against Iran is just a conspiracy from some countries.
Some analysts anticipate a more robust American response compared to its previous retaliatory strikes in Iraq and Syria. Iran-backed militants have targeted U.S. military facilities in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan more than 160 times since the start of the Israel-Hamas war last October, but Sunday's strike marks the first instance where fatalities have occurred. Even before Sunday's attack, several Republican lawmakers had called for a direct strike inside Iran. However, as of now, it seems unlikely that this will happen.
We are not looking for a war with Iran. We are not seeking a conflict with the regime in a military way. And as I said in the opening, we're not looking to escalate here.
Kirby also assured that Washington's response would not affect the ongoing ceasefire negotiations with Hamas to release more hostages from the Israel-Hamas war. All this comes as new details of Sunday's drone attack emerge. Citing unnamed U.S. officials, CNN and the Associated Press report that the drone may have been mistaken for an American one returning to the base around the same time, potentially causing a delay in the U.S. response. 송유진, Arirang News.
Israeli officials have presented evidence that has prompted a halt to funding for a UN Palestinian aid agency. The officials produced a document which alleges that some of the agency's staff were involved in Hamas's killing of civilians during its October 7th attack against Israel, which led to the war in Gaza. Yoon reports.
More than 10 countries, including major donors such as the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany, have suspended funding to the UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, since Friday. This was following an Israeli intelligence dossier presenting allegations that some staff took part in abductions and killings during the October 7th raid that sparked the Gaza war. According to Reuters, the 6-page document claims some 190 UNRWA employees, including teachers, have doubled as Hamas or Islamic Jihad militants, with names and pictures for 11 of them. A UN spokesperson said that the organization has not formally received a copy of the dossier and reiterated that the UNRWA would be unable to continue operations in Gaza and across the region beyond the end of February if funding isn't resumed.
And the United Nations is taking swift action following the extremely serious allegations made against several staff members from UNRWA. Critical humanitarian work that the UN does, not only in Gaza, all over the region, needs to be supported. People's lives depend on it.
He added that organization chief Antonio Guterres met with the head of internal UN investigations to ensure that an inquiry into the allegations will be done swiftly and as efficiently as possible. At a news conference, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the allegations were highly credible and deeply troubling. Without saying how soon or under what circumstances the U.S. would consider resuming support for UNRWA, Blinken said that Washington would be looking very hard at the steps UNRWA takes in response.
The reports that we got last week, and UNRWA brought them to us, were deeply, deeply troubling. It is imperative that UNRWA immediately, as it said it would, investigate, that it hold people accountable as necessary, and that it review its procedures. I had a very good...
The recent revelation jeopardizes aid operation in the region, as the agency supported more than half of Gaza's 2.3 million Palestinians in day-to-day assistance, which have already been stretched thin by the long-running war. Yoon, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, the South Korean government has again strongly protested over Japan's repeated territorial claims to Dokdo Island. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa said in a speech during a session of the Diet on Tuesday that the island was the territory of Japan historically, geographically, and under international law. This is the 11th year in a row that a Japanese foreign minister has made such claims during an annual speech on the country's foreign policy objectives. In response, the South Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson said in a statement that Tokyo should immediately withdraw such claims. And a memorial built 20 years ago in Japan's Gunma Prefecture to remember Korean victims of wartime forced labor is now being removed despite protests from civic groups and others there. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji tells us more.
Remembrance, reflection, and friendship. This is what's written on the front of a monument at a park in Gunma Prefecture, Japan, in 3 languages: English, Korean, and Japanese. On the back, it says Japan reflects deeply on the historical facts that caused significant damage to the Korean people, and that it will never repeat the same mistakes. The memorial was built 20 years ago by a civic group in Japan to remember the Korean victims who were forced to work as laborers during Japan's colonial rule of Korea from 1910 to 1945. It was mainly created to promote friendship between the 2 neighboring countries and the public's understanding of the history. But in 2014, Gunma Prefecture refused to renew the state permit, claiming there was a violation of rules after a civic activist made inappropriate political remarks in front of the monument. Then in 2022, Japan's top court ruled in favor of the Gunma officials. And starting this week, the local authorities have now closed the park and have begun to remove the memorial.
Gunma Prefecture gave permission for a monument to be built based on the condition that religious and political events and administrative matters would not be held there. However, I have heard permission has been revoked because the installer repeatedly violated these conditions.
The removal procedure was carried out despite strong protests from civic groups and others. Even the Japanese local news, Asahi Shimbun, said in an editorial on Tuesday that the local government should call off its decision to remove the memorial, calling on them to immediately stop the outrageous action. In response, the South Korean government simply said it hopes the issue can be taken care of without causing friction.
Our government hopes this issue can be resolved in a way that does not undermine the friendly relations between the 2 countries. To do this, necessary communication is taking place between South Korea and Japan.
The historical issue surrounding wartime forced labor has been a major factor that strained bilateral relations, as hundreds of thousands of Koreans were forced to work in Japanese companies under harsh conditions during colonial rule. 배은지, Arirang News.
On the local front, at another livelihood policy debate session, President Yoon this time vowed to streamline the workload for people when they're getting administrative services by making hundreds of services fully digital. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon explains.
1,500 government services will be fully digitalized over the next 3 years for easier and simpler access for citizens and residents. That's around a quarter of all services offered by the government. The announcement came from President Yoon on Tuesday during the 7th livelihood policy discussion with citizens.
국민들이 이리저리 뛰고 각종 증빙 서류들을 준비할 필요 없이 간편하게 필요한 업무를 신청할 수 있게 하겠습니다. 매년 7억 건에 달하는 구비 서류를 30%만 디지털화해도 조 단위의 예산이 절감됩니다.
President Yoon also said the basic information that's used for different services will be soon shared among agencies so applicants do not have to get multiple copies for each, while the more than a century-old personal seal system will be digitalized as well. This is South Korea trying to take a step further despite already having a global lead in digital government. The Interior Ministry said on Tuesday that South Korea ranked number 1 on the 2023 OECD Digital Government Index, topping 4 of the 6 categories: data-driven public sector, government as a platform, open by default, and proactiveness. It came second for the remaining 2, digital by design and user-driven. This is the second consecutive time South Korea topped the list, last time published back in 2019. But as participants in the discussion laid out, there's room to grow, and President Yoon agreed.
이렇게 훌륭한 디지털 정부를 우리가 구축해 놨지만 국민들께서 그 편의성을 체감하기에는 부족한 점이 매우 많이 남아 있습니다. 특히 자영업자나 소규모 기업인들께서 현실에 대하는 행정 업무가 많은 부담이 되고 있습니다.
Other topics covered during this discussion were the gaming industry and telemedicine. For the gaming industry, deceptive item selling practices by gaming companies were raised as a key issue. While gaming companies say there are percentages for a player to win something in a random draw, it's not fully transparent to gamers. The relevant officials vowed to stop this through regulation. As for the telemedicine industry, the government says it's looking to expand the scope of who's eligible to receive care remotely. In addition, they're looking to create a platform so medical records are accessible by healthcare providers to avoid patients having to visit prior hospitals to get their records. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And President Yoon today exercised his veto over a special bill on a probe into the Itaewon tragedy that happened more than a year ago, which is likely to cause some political repercussions. And on the same day, the government announced to up support for victims and anyone affected. Our political correspondent Shin Jia reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol on Tuesday vetoed a special bill for an independent investigation into the 2022 Itaewon crowd crush disaster, marking his fifth veto since taking office. The bill will now revert to the National Assembly for a revote. This came as the cabinet earlier the same day passed a motion requesting Yoon to reconsider the bill. During the cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Han Duk-soo said the investigation had been conducted properly, emphasizing the legal action was being taken against those being held responsible. He also mentioned that the special bill offers no practical benefit.
The bill risks wasting national resources without a clear justification or benefits, potentially deepening public division and mistrust.
Han also called for negotiations to develop a new proposal ensuring a fair investigation and preventive measures against similar future tragedies. Separately, the same day, the government announced plans to enhance financial and mental support for the families of the victims.
To provide better support for the bereaved families, the government plans to establish and operate a committee under the Prime Minister's office.
The plans include expanded coverage for medical costs and the establishment of a memorial area. The main opposition Democratic Party, however, strongly criticized the government's move to scrap the bill.
Using the veto to obscure the truth of the deadly disaster that resulted in numerous casualties in the capital is indefensible.
In response, the ruling People Power Party, which had earlier recommended President Yoon reconsider the bill, sought on Tuesday to renegotiate with the DP. PPP floor leader Yoon Jae-ok, speaking to reporters on Tuesday, stated that a bipartisan agreement could be reached by removing contentious clauses from the bill, such as those favoring the formation of an opposition-based investigation committee. Shin Jia, Arirang News.
Moving on, Korea's trade regulators are hammering out a framework of guidelines to ensure fair business practices among online platforms. And according to our Moon Hae-ryun, the details to be disclosed in a few weeks.
A bill to regulate market domination by online platforms has sparked debate among domestic and global businesses in the tech industry. The Online Platform Fairness Act is currently being drafted by South Korea's Fair Trade Commission, with the bill set to be announced sometime next month. The FTC aims to prohibit unfair business practices and ease consumer burdens by restricting market leaders from keeping competition in check. This in turn could provide more opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses and startups to enter the market. While the full details of the bill have yet to be revealed, the FTC has said that it would crack down on platforms that are engaging in monopolistic practices, citing Google's policies preventing game publishers from releasing their titles outside of Google's Play Store. It also cited domestic tech giant Kakao's manipulation of its algorithm to favor its own cab drivers above others on its Kakao mobility apps. The regulator has said that it will define market leaders by setting a quantitative standard such as for sales and the number of users, similarly to how the EU qualifies a large online platform as a gatekeeper in its Digital Markets Act. But domestic startup firms were found to have concerns in a survey conducted by Startup Alliance Korea, with many saying that startups that are not profitable but have a large number of users face being regulated, which could hinder growth. In response to growing concerns from the tech industry, the government says that it will limit the number of companies it defines as a market leader to 4 or 5 firms. These are most likely to be domestic tech companies Naver and Kakao, as well as global firms such as Google and Apple. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce voiced opposition to the proposed regulations, calling on Seoul to provide sufficient opportunity for dialogue with Washington and to make the full text of the proposed legislation publicly available. In response, the FTC issued a statement on Tuesday, noting that all efforts will be made for open communication with domestic and foreign channels, including providing ample opportunities for the U.S. to submit its opinion. 문혜련, Arirang News.
In tourism, the number of foreign visitors to Korea saw a marked increase last year. Data from the Korea Tourism Organization on Tuesday show over 11 million tourists came to South Korea in 2023. This number represents an increase of up to 63% of pre-COVID-19 levels in 2019. And in terms of nationality, in first place were Japanese visitors at 2.3 million, followed by Chinese, American, and Taiwanese tourists. Since last July, the number of visitors has exceeded 1 million per month for 6 consecutive months. Moreover, tourism revenue increased by over 26%, reaching around $13 billion compared to the previous year. Now to the 4th Winter Youth Olympic Games taking place in South Korea's Gangwon province. Today, Team Korea added a silver medal in the women's singles figure skating. 15-year-old Shin Jia finished second with a total score of 191.83 points, trailing 5 points behind Japan's Shimada Mao. Shin was ranked third after the short program, but managed to outperform Japan's Takagi Yo, placing second in the free skating event. This brings Korea's total medal count at Gangwon 2024 to 5 gold, 6 silver, and 4 bronze.
With milder winter temperatures, murky skies continue throughout the day. As the atmosphere stagnates, ultrafine dust will persist tomorrow. The Seoul metropolitan area, Yeongseoin, Gangwon-do, the Chungcheong-do provinces, and Daegu are expected to have bad levels of ultrafine dust tomorrow. Please wear fine dust mask when you go out. The rain that started on Jeju Island in the afternoon will expand to the southern parts of the Chungcheong-do provinces overnight. Up to 30 millimeters of winter rain will fall on Jeju Island and 5 to 10 in Chungcheong-do and south by tomorrow morning. Most of this rain will move away tomorrow morning. However, on Thursday, there will be another round of rain or snow in Yeongdong and the southern parts of the country. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Daejeon will start off at 0 degrees. Daily highs will be topping out at 9 both in Seoul and Daejeon, Gyeongju and Busan 13 degrees Celsius. In Gangwon-do province, where the Youth Olympic Games are being held, daytime temperatures will be a little bit milder than today. There will be no major cold for the rest of the week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Good night.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라.